Welcome to session 4 of the Generation to Generation course, where we'll be looking at David and Saul. The quote you've just read may have a modern ring to it, but in reality it was written in the 8th century BC by the poet Hesiod. Generational tensions clearly have been around a long time, and you can still see them today in our modern world. You just need to read your newspapers or your online news outlets, and you'll see mentions of the snowflake generation, looking at the millennials and how they are supposedly not very robust. Or the millennials returning back, talking about okay boomer is another phrase you may hear. For David and Saul, you can see two people of different generations. Generational theory would suggest that the way that we grow up and the time that we grow up and the nature of our upbringing will change over time. And that's part of the reason why generations are different. David and Saul started off with a really good relationship. Saul was struggling from an evil spirit, and they went out to look for a lyre player who could bring him comfort. And David was that lyre player. And for a time, Saul really liked David and made him an armor bearer. But that lyre player soon became the defeater of Goliath and soon became a warrior of renown. And as time went on, that relationship, those tensions between them, between the older Saul and the younger David, got worse and worse and became very problematic. How are different generations in your church? Do they all get on well all the time? Or do tensions inevitably arise? It could well be asked why there are tensions between generations in churches. Why can't the church be as one and get on well together? Jason Bryan Santos, a North American author, has said that part of the problem is separation of the generations. He asks his readers to imagine the Mickey Mouse logo, which is one big circle and then two smaller circles for ears. And he said, imagine what he calls the Van Gogh Mickey. In other words, take away one of those ears. And he says that's a good representation of often what churches are like. In Mickey's head, in the big circle, are the adults in the church. But then in this smaller circle are the children and youth of the church. And the point about the Van Gogh Mickey is the two circles don't overlap. They barely connect. And he says that churches often say, why do young people leave our churches? And he would reply, well, they never were in your churches. They were in their own programs, connected to their own leaders, and they never interacted with the rest of the church. Other authors have used the idea of silos, as like grain silos, where you separate different grains into different tall silos. So that actually our churches have become like silos. The young people have their groups. The working parents get together in their groups. The retired people have their groups. And there's no interaction between them. That, they believe, is the cause of tensions. And you can see some of those tensions in churches. Some of those tensions might even be trivial. You can see different ways of dressing from different generations. You might have the silent generation, the older ones, wearing shirt and tie or even hats and looking very smart. You then got the baby boomers, who are fairly smart. They might have nice trousers, reasonable trousers, or a blouse or a shirt on, but no tie, no hats. Then you have the Generation X's like me and those younger who are much more casual and don't really think in those terms. Are tensions inevitable? British author Gareth Crispin has drawn on an old theological viewpoint called the theology of accommodation to say that actually there are ways in which those tensions can be removed. He says the theology of accommodation says how God accommodates human, although God is holy and we are not. He is willing to accommodate us to build up that relationship so that he can communicate and know us and we can know him. And Gareth Crispin says we should be willing to do the same between generations to accommodate the needs and ways of different generations in the same way that God himself has accommodated us. By doing that, then these tensions can be dealt with and taken away. Hesiod, our poet from the 8th century, how no hope for the future because of the youngsters coming through. Jesus, before his arrest, prayed, and he prayed that all those who believed him in the future, they would be one. He had hope that this was possible. As you look today at session 4 at David and Saul and reflect on generational tensions, reflect also on how they can be worked against, how they can be solved. It's not inevitable that different generations will be in conflict. Intergenerational interaction can help to build those relationships that remove those tensions.